Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living
with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And welcome. You are tuned into my weekly talk radio show called Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa every Tuesday at naturally high noon here out of the Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, California with UBN Radio TV, Universal Broadcasting Network, and then every Thursday at 7, Saturday at 1 on my syndicated CNBC NBC News radio channel, KCAA AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, radio that leaves no listener behind, that also features Dave Ramsey and Stephanie Miller. So tune in there and everywhere, syndicated on iHeartRadio. So thank you for listening to me splatter hope and happiness all over you, because there's no gossip, no scandal, and no K-words, no Kardashian talk at all. Instead, I want you to focus on your own reality show and how you can be happy 88% of the time. And if you haven't seen it yet, I was written up in Forbes magazine. I'm so grateful to Cheryl Snap Connor, and it's called PR Strategies for One-Person Business. That's me. And also Inc., what came out, Steve Farber wrote about me on perfectionism. So I have tips on that. So please do go and find my name there, and you will have free advice that I don't use. And more great news, my YouTube views are now over 104,000 views. I'm so grateful. Thank you, all of my listeners and supporters, for continuing to give me a thumbs up at Dr. Marissa on Facebook, my public page, Dr. Marissa, and also subscribing on YouTube, subscribing on iTunes. It's all free, but the numbers do help in getting sponsors to keep this show on the air. And I am now in my 6th consecutive year. For those who are just joining, I did win the 2016 Podcast of the Year Top 10 Award in Health, and I'm grateful to you for that as well. Also, if you haven't already seen the shows, I've had some great guests for Hope and Happiness, like Marianne Williamson, to Marianne from Gilligan's Island, Don Wells, child to adult movie star Corey Feldman, and the secret teacher, and also my big brother, Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, who's actually the one who dubbed me and introduced me to Oprah earlier this year as the Asian Oprah. I've also had Muhammad Ali's daughter, Layla Ali, on. So if you've missed any of the shows, it's easy. Just go to YouTube, type in Dr. Marissa on the playlist radio. You can see and hear because of the cameras in the studio. And I also have 2 special series, actually 3. One is call-ins. So if you have any advice that you would like from me, please do sign up with me at forbalance.org to be my next call-in as Dr. Marissa, the kinder, gentler Dr. Laura. I have sexual healing with Dr. Marissa last week of every month, because I'm determined to make pleasure a G-rated topic. And then finally, I do have specials, my radio for our deaf community. Because of the cameras in the studio, after my first year, I bring in interpreters. So if you know anyone who uses one of the most beautiful languages in the world, the American Sign Language, please do direct them to that playlist. All right. And now, today, I have a wonderful guest for you, for all the business owners out there who want or are thinking about or who have dreamed about going international and global. He is Phillip Auerbach, who's helped hundreds, actually, I think more than hundreds, of many, many hundreds, thank you, of Fortune 500 companies develop and execute global strategies, including marketing, designing, and implementing to develop new international markets. Mr. Auerbach speaks French and Japanese, as well as some Spanish, German, Italian, and Chinese. I thought I had a lot. Over his extensive career, he has worked and traveled in over 50 countries throughout Western Europe, the former USSR, the Pacific Rim, South Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas. Mr. Auerbach earned an international MBA degree with a specialization in marketing from the Thunderbird School of Global Management and also studied at Institut Catholique in Paris, Waseda University in Tokyo, and East China Normal University in Shanghai. He's been an adjunct professor teaching translations project management at the Monterey Institute for International Studies. Please welcome live in studio, Mr. Phillip Auerbach. Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to have you here. How are we doing on science? Sound is okay? Do you want him to sit a little bit closer? There we go. We don't want to lose any of this global business wisdom. So let's start with why globalize? Why would people want to take their business and move it globally or international? What's the upside?
The United States is a huge market, of course, and so
Yes.
people tend to focus here because it's easy and familiar. But the fact is that 72% of the world out there does not speak English. That's about 6.1 billion people. And the statistics show that people who put their websites or their messages in other languages, 86% of them have far more clicks, almost double the amount of clicks or click-throughs than people who keep their information only in English. And as importantly, about $190 billion, American exports are about $190 billion per month.
Wow.
So people don't realize that that's, what a huge number that is. And of
Yes.
course, if you're not getting a piece of that action, you're missing a lot of opportunities.
I'm sold. It sounds like a great reason to. And let's go back to the 72%. I'm surprised, and I think it's because we as Americans think we're very ethnocentric, right?
Yes.
We're the center of everything.
Of course.
So we are only 38%. English is only
About 28%.
28%. It reminds me of that joke. What do you call a person who speaks 2 languages?
Bilingual,
3 languages?
trilingual,
Only 1 language?
American, of course.
You have heard that joke. Good. You got the punchline. So, so absolutely. In fact, I love trying to share languages with people. And since you are the expert, we'll take a little language lesson here. How do you say thank you in Japanese?
Domo arigato.
Domo arigato. And Chinese?
Xie.
Very good. That was a test. That's Mandarin.
And that's Mandarin.
Yes. And in Cantonese?
I don't know Cantonese.
Okay, I'll teach it. There's two ways to say thank you in Cantonese. One is if someone gives you or does something for you, it's mgoi. And if someone gives you something, it's totse.
Tose.
Totse. Interesting. So let me see. What other language do you speak? French.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci. Not murky. Not murky.
Not mercy.
Murky buckets.
Mercy buckets.
I heard
no.
a guy from Texas say that. It was not pretty. As well as German.
Thank you. Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. That one I knew. Ich habe 3 Jahre in die Schule Deutsch gelernt.
Ja?
Ja.
Sehr gut. Ja. Ich habe nur ein Jahr in Gymnasium gestudiert, Deutsch. Which means I studied German only for 1 year in high school.
And mine meant I studied in school. I actually grew up in a German town and wore lederhosen in the Oktoberfest parade because before I had enough to fill out a dirndl. That was TMI, I'm sure. Okay. And then, let's see, Spanish.
Gracias.
Gracias. Is the Spanish that's spoken in America, hablo español. I'm horrible at it, by the way. My daughters speak beautiful Spanish. Is it also dialect different than Spain or Mexico?
Yeah, there are many dialects of Spanish, or flavors of Spanish, whatever you want to call. The primary ones are, of course, Castilian, which means European Spanish. And then the other major dialect, of course, is Latin American, which there are 2 kinds of Latin American, sort of northern Latin America, and then the southern cone, which is Argentina and Chile. They've got their very distinct grammar patterns and vocabulary. And Mexico, of course.
Right, right. Now, is it true, because I've heard this, that on one hand, if you're going to another country, it's good to learn at least hello and thank you to show that you value the difference in the country. And then I've also heard that there's some places where they just would prefer you to speak English because you butcher their language so badly.
Well, it's not, well, maybe you butcher their language, but of course people want to learn English and want to have people to speak too. So it works both ways. You know, it's always a wonderful idea for travelers or Americans to know some words of other languages, to just be polite. And, and then, but again, you start speaking another language and very often the natives will start speaking to you in English.
Great, great. And so you actually are an expert in translating things from English into the different languages that you're going to. What's the biggest pitfall that people fall into when they do translations?
Well, my firm translates anything into 80 world languages in both directions, English to others and others into English. And we do a few more than 100, than 80, but I'm very modest, so we just advertise 80.
Say 80. And 8's a lucky number in Chinese.
That's right, yes.
So we'll keep it at 80.
We'll keep it at 80. So in terms of pitfalls for translations, I guess one of the biggest is to think that if you speak a language, you can translate it. And that's something that companies make a mistake of a lot. They think, you know, Juan down the hall or Maria down the hall comes from there, so let's ask her to do it for us. And that's perfectly fine on something very simple, on a very elementary level. You know, where's the street? Where's the church? Does this dress come in blue? Whatever. But if you're doing anything technical, which is what most businesses do, that's a huge mistake because, you know, many of these people came to this country, say, when they were 10. Do you know? You speak Cantonese? Do you know how to say telecom words and software words and technical wine words and agriculture in China? No, of course not. So it's the same thing. People don't know technical terminology in their native languages.
Yeah. So that common language is very different than technical language.
Than technical language.
Okay. Absolutely.
And the other big mistake that people think is that Google Translate will work fine.
Google Translate does not work fine. Trust me.
Does not work fine.
People post all kinds of stuff or hit on me on Facebook with different languages, and I translate, and it's like, that's not pretty. That was not a compliment. So whatever it was.
Well, Google Translate is fine to get the gist of what something says. So if you've got something in another language, you want to know what it means in English, that it'll give you 85% of it. But very often it's the nuances and the other little words that will throw you.
Right.
And so people make the huge mistake of putting their websites and, using Google Translate to put their websites and brochures in other languages. And that's something absolutely do not do.
Right.
Because it should never be used for outbound marketing. Same thing for contracts. And I'll give you a very simple example. Now, this happened many years ago, and Google has definitely improved since then, but I'll tell you the story anyway.
Okay.
One day a person came off the street, saw a sign on the street and came in and said, look, I had a letter I used Google Translate to send this to my counterparts in China. They wrote back to me in English saying, please write English, we know not what you say. And so they came to us to find out what did they say. So they gave, this is what they sent, and this is what Google Translate did. And we looked at the two, and the English said, next Tuesday we will have a board meeting, and Google Translate said, next Tuesday we will have a collection of planks of wood.
Literal translation.
Yeah, so again, it's become much better since then, but you risk those kinds of mistakes.
Well, the classic branding error was Nova. Right? The Chevrolets, the car they tried to introduce in Mexico, Nova means no go.
And I've read since then that actually did not happen.
Oh, really?
Which is really amazing.
Oh.
But there are many. But it illustrates the wonderful point that the other mistake companies make, especially, is to assume that their English, their company name, their product name, or their tagline can just be translated directly and it will work. And that's a huge mistake and one I can give you many examples, but one classic one is you've heard of Puff's tissues,
Yes.
facial tissues.
Yep.
So Puff introduced itself the same name in Europe. In Britain, Puff, they didn't know this. They didn't realize Puff is the name, derogatory word for gay or homosexual.
Okay.
And also Puff in German is a slang word for whorehouse.
Nice. So that's what you
yes.
want to use
That's
to
what you
blow
wanna
your
use.
nose
Exactly.
with. Yeah. So the nuance, the translation, we have the value behind going international. Did you always know that you were going to be doing this?
No, but I had a good sense when I was a child.
You liked languages?
Well, I liked understanding how people communicated because my family didn't communicate well.
Ah, yes.
I should clarify that. My parents divorced when I was 3, and back in those days it was incredibly unusual, simply not done. And I tried to communicate with my father, and it was very, very difficult to, just because of his own personality. And so I had this bizarre notion that he was totally monolingual. He only knew English. But I had this bizarre notion that, well, maybe if I learn another language, maybe that will work.
Okay.
And he also traveled a lot around the world, and so he exposed me to the world and to learn that there are many different styles of communicating and many assumptions that what works with within a family or within 2 different cultures may not be the same at all.
So it sounds like, out of black bananas, you can still make some good banana bread.
That's right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's what life's about.
Yes.
That's what life's about. So if you've just tuned in and you're wondering who I'm talking to, I have an international expert for your business. Phillip Auerbach International is his website, and he is my resident expert when I do go global. He will be helping me with that transition. You are tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa, a show about hope and happiness and all kinds of things that are business and spiritual and for kids and for adults. So glad you're tuning in today. So next question for you, Phillip, is on your going international, what would you say? Let's see. What are did the common mistakes? So international strategy. What do you help companies do? So how does a company get your value add?
Well, basically, a company would come to us to tell us either where in the world they want to expand into or what additional countries or perhaps where they're having problems expanding into. And, so we would basically diagnose the issue and propose strategies to help them. So I'll give you some very elementary ones.
Okay. Example, real life example.
Real life example. So one of the things Americans do is to assume that, in this country, I can be in California, pick up the phone and talk to someone in Maine and, just do a deal and that's fine. We've never met before and we haven't spoken before. But that's not the way it's done in most of the world. So Americans assume that they can just go to a country, meet someone for lunch, talk about business, and do a deal.
The deal's done.
And the deal is done. And absolutely that does not work.
Right.
Because the first rule in one of the first rules in international business is that you have to establish relationships with people. That we live in a country where it's very informal and, again, you can just call someone or email
Not a big
someone.
deal.
It's not a big deal. But in most of the world, the relationships that you establish with people are critical because that connotes trust.
Right.
And therefore, if something goes wrong with the contract, it's okay because the relationship is still built on trust and knowing that the 2 parties will try to make it right, as opposed to let's sue them immediately.
Yes, yeah, because it's not just a language; it's a cultural
issue.
Difference and nuance.
Another example: we're working with with an American consumer products company, a healthcare consumer products company that's looking to expand into Japan, and so one of the first things we're advising them is, again, this is very elementary from the beginning. Don't take your American videos and just put them into Japanese because the messaging is all wrong. Americans, again, will talk right about this is the product, this is how wonderful we are, this is the benefit, this is the money that you're going to save or the money you're going to make and so forth.
Right.
And in Japan, you absolutely don't do that.
Right.
You talk about everything else, the benefits to your community, the benefits to your family, the benefits to your whole group that you may be a part of, like an association or something. And way down the line, after you've talked to people a lot, then you can talk about price and revenue.
Right. That's a huge one. That's a huge one. And it is a big difference. I lived in Brussels, Belgium for 2 years. And I had a friend who said, do you notice anything about what is being sold on the shelf? And I looked and no, I mean, everything looks, there's a price and everything. And he goes, what's missing is we don't have things like 50% more, right? We don't have 20% more. It's just whatever size it is. And they could never understand that whole volume grand slam breakfast with, like, why would you want to have that much food on one plate? So it definitely is. And another example, I'll just highlight yours in Japan. I did some business doing AT&T strategy, international strategy. And one of the differences was, the American could not understand. I asked them, do you understand what I'm talking about? And they would all nod their head and say yes. And he said, but then they would go and do what I asked them, and they get it wrong. Right. I don't. Why would they say, yes, I understand it, if they clearly didn't understand it, and walk away and do something wrong? And he was mad, and I sat him down and said, well, first of all, it is highly insulting for in Japanese culture to say I don't understand you, because the fault is of the sender, not of the listener. So I don't want to tell you that I didn't understand, because I'd be insulting you as the sender of the message.
Yes, it's about losing face, which is a very critical concept in East Asia.
Exactly. So get over it and quit blaming them, and you change the way that you are communicating. And
it's also, but it's also sometimes how you ask the question. If I say, if you should never ask a question with the negative, like, you understand this, don't you? Because in Japanese, you're responding to the don't you part. No, I don't understand. Or yes, I don't understand this, as opposed to no, I don't understand this.
Interesting. And the other Chinese difference, the biggest difference that I see is on saving face is also the bragging part, which is kind of tied to pricing, right?
Yes, right.
It's there's a saying in Chinese and Japanese, and some car company just used this in their commercial. I was shocked when I heard it. The nail that stands up is hammered down,
banged down. Yes,
right? So
exactly.
you're not supposed to say, I'm good at this. If you talk to a Chinese carpenter and say, are you a good carpenter? Right? I want to hire the best carpenter. They'll say, "Oh no, just average." Right. And Americans are like, "Well, heck, I don't want to hire an average carpenter, right?" But they're the best. But they're just not
in
allowed
East
to say.
Asia. It's very common, and I do this myself also because I've lived in Asia. You never brag about yourself. You never brag about your children. And if someone pays you a compliment, you always downplay. Gee, my daughter is. I would say to you, gee, your child is so smart, and you would say.
I'd say, oh no, she's just average, or tell you something that she does that's bad.
She does wrong or something, right?
Now you know why I have all the hang-ups I do, right? I grew up in that.
Yeah, so this is very typical. Where you don't toot your horn and you don't say how wonderful you are, because it's considered certainly impolite, but it's considered bragging and arrogant and
which is why there's a perception that Americans are very arrogant and ethnocentric, and we kind of are. Yeah, because we think that everybody else should adapt to our culture. Right. That whole when in Rome, do as you're. I was part of the first diversity training in LA, helped to perform that. Helped to create some of that programming. And I have to give a peace shout out to Howard Phillips, who I worked with in LA County. He's not doing well right now in his health, and I just found out yesterday. So I just want to send him a healing piece to him. But so there's a phenomena, and you might be aware of this, called the backyard effect, where it's okay to travel and you see diversity as something good, but as soon as you come home and you see that same difference, it's somehow bad. And and one of the great things that I love about the way you move and groove, Phillip, is that you are so respectful. And I noticed that about you the first time I met you at CEO Space International. And so thank you for being that. And you're perfectly tooled to do this kind of work because you're knowledgeable about that.
Well, one of the other mistakes that Americans make is to assume that, as you've said, that everyone is like us, which is totally ridiculous. But more than that, that we're an extremely casual society. And most cultures out there are much more formal, and hierarchy is extremely important, and status is extremely important. And Americans don't respect that or understand that. And so one of the things which absolutely grates on me is that in this culture, everyone first names each other, call a total stranger by his first name. And if you're an immigrant coming here, it's shocking. It's totally shocking, and I still get shocked every time. I was born and raised here, but if people call me and try to sell me something, and they start with my first name, my first reaction is, "Who are you? And do you know me? And have we met? And why are you calling me by my first name?"
And in other words,
not respectful.
no sale.
Well, basically, because if you start formal, like Mr., Ms., or doctor, or professor, whatever, you can always go informal. Please call me so-and-so. But if you start with a first name, you have no opportunity to go formal.
To go back way.
You can't go backwards. So it's always safe when you're dealing with people, immigrants in this society or people abroad, to use their titles. Titles are extremely important in most cultures.
Beautiful. So it sounds like if you are willing or interested in doing international business, the first skill you need is respect.
Respect and understanding and knowledge that the way we do it here is not the way you do it there necessarily.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people kind of fall into?
I told the one. I said the one about the brand naming and so forth, and about lunch. Let me see, what are the other ones?
Actually, I just got the signal. I'll let you think about that while we go on a break, because I just got the sign that we are midway through the program. You are tuned in to Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa. And we'll be back after a sponsorship break. We'll be back in 2 and 2. Peace in and peace out. Do you want to take your business global? Need to understand different cultures to reach a wider audience? Professional translations into 80 languages? Then contact Phillip Auerbach for expert guidance on international business strategy and more. Visit www.auerbach-international.com. That's AUERBACH-INTL.com for global success. And we are back. You are tuned into my weekly talk radio show called Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa every Tuesday at Naturally High Noon, here out of the Sunset Gower Studios, where Scandal, Newsroom, and Heroes are created, and also Dr. Marissa's show for you about hope and happiness. So there's no gossip, no scandal, no K-words on Tuesday at noon, Naturally High Noon, Thursday at 7, Saturday at 1 on my syndicated CNBC News Radio channel, KCAA, and all over on iHeartRadio. And today we're talking about international business strategy and how Phillip Auerbach can help you with that. Not only translations, but we just discovered that the number one skill to have is respect and understanding of different cultures and the way they do business. And you were going to come back and give me another example.
It's similar to what I've said, but Americans look for instant gratification and short-termism. You know, I want it now, I want it in 3 seconds, and I want it to work right away. And usually that does not happen.
Yes.
It's not short-term. It can take a while to cultivate. And again, relationships are very important. And if you're not cultivating the relationships, then the rest of it doesn't really matter.
And now, is this true for all cultures? Are there any cultures that are kind of like us?
Yes, the Australians, New Zealanders, and the Israelis.
Are more on the
Very casual side.
casual first name, do it now, let's make a decision.
Right.
Would Canadians too, maybe?
They're much more. The Canadians are a balance between American and European. You know, they were colonized by the British and the French.
Right.
And so, and they have a huge immigrant population. I think 25% or more is immigrants, recent immigrants. So Canada's an interesting hybrid, but they're much more European in that way. They're a bit slower, calmer, and
Yes.
you know, take your time and
Yes.
don't rush it.
Yes,
Don't
I was
push
born
it.
in Canada,
Ah.
and I love the little cartoon with the guy saying "I protest," and he's holding up a sign that just says "I protest." Not very protesting. So, how do I choose what countries I'd like to start in? So do you tell people it's better to start in one country or hit them all, or how does that decision
Well, it depends,
happen?
of course, on what the product or service is.
Okay.
I mean, one hint that people have is what kind of inquiries you've gotten from abroad on your website or your blogs, whatever.
Okay.
Interests, perhaps orders from other countries.
Okay.
So that's a hint of where a market might be. But one way that we would start is basically, again, looking at your product or service.
Okay, so
seeing
let's practice with me, since I have you here.
what your
So
your show.
my show, okay.
Okay.
I'm already in over 100 countries because of the broadcast bandwidth. But let's say I was going to do a Facebook ad. Where would I go first?
Well, I'd have to understand your audience demographics to see, obviously, where
60-40 women, men. The largest audience being in the baby boomer and the generation right before that. Although my largest growing audience is the millennials.
But what nationality or what culture doesn't matter?
My India, China. Apparently, I have this huge following in China. I don't know why. Could be because I am Chinese. India, China, Australia, England, Italy. Those are my top foreign countries.
Yeah, I was going to suggest China just because you are ethnically
Yes,
Chinese, so
yes.
that would be the obvious one.
You didn't think I was Swedish?
Not quite,
No,
although
okay.
I have dark hair, and when I was on a train in Europe once, this was during the Vietnam War years and years ago, and we were playing in the compartment. We were playing Guess the Nationality, and so we went around the compartment. People came to me and they asked where I'm from, and I said guess, and someone said Swedish. I said, really? I thought all Swedes were, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes. And they said, no, they're dark-haired Swedes. And I said, well, no, I'm actually American. I said, oh, well, then you must be from the CIA. That's the reaction.
That's funny.
So that's my Swedish story.
All right, Swedish CIA.
But in terms of you, you know, certainly China and probably Europe because of the, you know, the kind of message that you have about health and healing and happiness and fulfillment and so forth. And that's much more common in Europe than it is in India, for example, where people are much, well, it's changing, of course, but there's the cultural tradition is fatalism and accepting your reality and not trying to change it very much. Same thing in the Philippines, for example. So, again, this is changing, but those are general rules of where to start.
And that's great information because if I'm using Facebook ads, they have that section where you can choose your audience by demographic and by country. So that makes sense. And I just did that as a little show of what it's like to work with Phillip, right? Because that's the kind of consulting you would do with your clients.
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So how do we find you?
The website?
Okay.
The website is www.auerbach, AUERBACH -INTL.com, Auerbach International.
Great. And I think Chris has been flashing your website up there, which is great. And that shows sort of the breadth. So you do translations.
We translate we translate to or from 80 languages, primarily business, government, and nonprofit work. And we also do global marketing strategies, identifying countries to go into and the strategies to get you there.
Beautiful, beautiful. What would you? I'm trying to remember what other great questions I prepared to ask you. So, what I know you've done some preparation. Anything else you wanted to cover?
I guess success stories of how we've helped companies.
Yes.
So I gave the example before of the Japanese, the American firm entering Japan and how you have to change the strategy for that. There's another small company you might have heard of called Fujitsu.
Yes.
That came to us because they had a translation problem. And, you know, in any manufacturing operation, doesn't matter Fujitsu or anybody else, you've got boxes. This is assuming you've got products. Boxes, you can't seal the boxes until all the components, until all the pieces are in place. And therefore, you can't close the box, you can't ship the box until everything is ready. So Fujitsu had a major problem that they had a language agency that was constantly late, like 2 weeks late, in translating the user manuals and the how-to guides and the getting started guides. And so they can't close the boxes, they can't ship the product, they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because simple translation issue.
Right.
Well, we came in and basically what this 2-week delay ended up not being a delay at all. We were able to get the job done literally within days, and we were within about a week or two we were delivering early, and so we've probably saved Fujitsu at least $500,000
great.
because we got the manuals printed, translated so they could print and they could print and close the box and ship the products.
Fabulous.
Something very simple.
Do you do all the translations, or do you hire people as well?
I don't do them at
Oh, you
all,
don't do
no.
them? Okay. You
I'm
hire.
not trained as a translator.
You
So
have to be trained as a
Yes, it's a
translator.
very common myth that if you speak a language, you can translate.
Interesting.
No, so I've studied conversational level to about 8 languages, some more than others, but I've never been trained as a professional translator, which is really a master's degree
Interesting.
in that field.
Okay.
My master's is in international marketing, not in translation.
Great. So international marketing, other things that people need to remember before
Basically, tailor the message accordingly. You have to understand the culture to understand what the benefits and appeals are to them. So, for example, again, Americans tend to focus on price and savings and volume and so forth.
Yep.
If you're going into Latin America, you probably want to talk about how your product or service benefits the family, because the family is very important. In Germany, you put an emphasis on greenness, on environmental issues, if you can do that. So they're different. So the benefits and appeals may be the same, but the emphasis is maybe totally different.
Right.
Certain ones you might say, certain ones you may not say.
Yeah. Now let's hit a little sensitive topic called stereotyping. So do you ever get accused of stereotyping and saying, well, this whole culture is this way or this whole culture is that way?
Well, it depends. I mean, Asian cultures are a little more stereotypable than Western cultures
Yeah,
are.
I have to say something about this. When I used to date, actually, when I have time to date, and a guy would say to me at lunch or dinner, I've always wanted to date an Asian woman. But if I stayed, if I didn't leave, I would say, number one, I'm not cooking for you. Number two, I'm not cleaning for you. And number three, I am only walking on your back if I have high heels on. Because anybody that knows me is I do not fall under that stereotype at all for the submissive and all
But there's a
of that.
difference between people in Asia and Asians in the United States, or Asians,
ABCs and CBCs.
ABCs, American-born Chinese, and so forth.
Yes.
So yeah, and there's also a difference between Asians in Asia who have studied in the West or in the United States versus those who haven't. So it's not necessarily stereotypes. There are certain trends that you can start with, and they may or may not apply.
Yeah.
But you know, it's always, if you start with the United States, the trends here are what I call the 3 I's: individualism, initiative, and independence.
Nice.
So foreigners who come here, immigrants who come here, become acculturated and learn certain American values, and those become part of their nature. And so there's a problem often between the first generation, the parents who come, versus the kids who go to high school and are with other
Enculturated.
other Americans, and the disconnect between the two.
Yeah.
So in the same way, each culture has certain values, certain core values.
Yeah.
Now, not every individual may have them, but they're brought up with certain values that they can accept or reject or modify.
Interesting. And I like when you said the trait. I think the trait.
Trend.
The trend. The trend. I think we get a lot of trouble because we see differences as bad.
Right.
If we stop seeing differences as bad, then it's not a big deal to say you're different than I am. Right?
Right.
Because that's where the truth in stereotypes come from. There are group differences.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with the group differences, but we get in that trouble because we walk by a microwave and we smell something that we're not sure about. Instead of saying, "Oh, I wonder what that is. I'm curious," we say, "Ugh, that smells. Who did that?" You know. So there's that judgment.
And it's very dangerous also because it's easy to stereotype all Muslims, for example, because of the problems in the world. But the reality is that people are individuals, and the way that the individuals can behave or be very different than, say the terrorists, for example.
Right.
Most people are not terrorists.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
The vast majority are not terrorists at all. They want to have a normal life like everyone else does.
Like everyone else. Exactly. Well, I'm just getting the signal. My last question to all of my guests is, who would you like to thank yourself for helping you be who you are? Who are you grateful to?
My parents, both of them. Even though my father was very difficult when I was a child, it's because of him that I became the opposite in many ways. And my mother was wonderful in a different way. My mother was unconditional. My father was very conditional.
So you got a nice contrast.
Well, not always so nice, but I learned very early on that there are many ways of looking at the same situation.
Yeah.
And that, to balance the two, or to cope with the world, or cope with, different people in your own family or society, you have to look at different points of view and understand that there are multiple ways up the mountain. There are many paths to get there, and not one path may be better than another, maybe shorter, quicker, faster, whatever, but there's still many ways up the mountain, and they can be equally as valid depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
And when.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Thank you, Phillip Auerbach. Go to his website, Auerbach, AUERBACH INTL International.com. If you are at all interested or at all thinking about global or international, Phillip is the man for you. He will help you with his expertise as well as his wonderful bedside manner as a consultant. That's really wonderful. Thank you for coming on the air with me.
Appreciate
it's
you
been
having
a
me
wonderful show, and best wishes for all that you do.
Thank you.
Yes, and that is Phillip Auerbach, and we are at the end of the show when I invite you to my balance bar to step up to see how you can have more balance in your life. And the first way right now is to make sure you are joined to my hip of the 21-day fast from complaining with Dr. Marissa. For those of you who don't know, I don't know where you've been. I've been talking about this for six years. Since 2011, July 1st, I started this good life habit. So if you want to change your life for the better, it's as simple as stopping your complaining. So if you want daily tips on that, you sign up at the number 4balance.org. As well, you can, I post all the time on my Facebook. If you haven't been on, I hit my friend limit a little while ago, so you'll have to go to Dr. Marissa, my public figure page, and give me the finger. I mean, a thumbs up, and then you'll get all of the notifications for the 21-day fast. And please do get my app that was created by teenagers that goes with the fast so that you can know when you are complaining or not. And also, please do join me in Seal Beach, California, my hometown. It's about time. I've been teaching now for 9 years, and this is the first time I'm teaching in my hometown by the pier, Sunset Balance Tai Qigong, every Monday at 6. Go to my meetup page, and you'll find out more information about that. And if you'd like to work with me on your own hope and happiness, if you want to go to international, you go to Phillip. But if you want to settle in your own space and figure out why you're not happy 88% of the time, then please do come work with me. I am taking a limited number of private clients next year, so if you'd like to do a test run with me and see if there's a fit, please do sign up at my website, the number 4balance.org, to get a complimentary session to see if we fit. And that's it. Next week, we always have wonderful guests here. If you've missed any of my past shows, from, as I said, Marianne from Gilligan's Island, to Neil Donald Walsh, to Bob Proctor, to Don Miguel Ruiz, to Casey Kasem's daughter, just go to my YouTube, subscribe there, and the iTunes as well. Because it's all about hope and happiness. Please stay tuned to take my advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa Pay. That's P for positive, EI. And remember, it's all about balance. Peace in and peace out.